Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and the glue that holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's get with the episode.
Your next assignments, they are unusual.
Grab onto something!
I'm trying!
So over the course of the last 12 months, we've had a bit to say on this show about how EA has handled the Star Wars license. There's been good, there's been bad, there's been ugly. We've seen 2 Battlefront games, we've seen the closure of Visceral Studios, we've seen Amy Hennig leave EA and it seemed to be with a little bit of friction, and now there's been another departure. We've also seen the announcement of Jedi Fallen Order from Respawn Entertainment, and there's a lot of questions that have been posed about where things are at when it comes to EA and Star Wars, whether all things are heading in the right direction, are some things what's working, what's not, and we're going to try and break as much of that down as possible, including the latest bit of news in this week's episode of The Insider. So Jade Raymond has been a fairly important person in the games industry over the course of the last decade or so, maybe getting closer to 20 years now. Jade has had an important role in the development of several games over the journey for a variety of different publishers, but specifically EA and Ubisoft. She has been responsible for working on The Sims Online, Assassin's Creed 1 and Assassin's Creed 2. She was directing those. She worked on Splinter Cell Blacklist. She had a hand in, and EA Motive specifically had a hand in the development of the single player campaign for Battlefront 2. And she's left. She's not at the studio anymore. And there's some really interesting circumstances around that and what it all means and what's going on, and we're going to look at a statement that was put out there and what that itself could mean, and we're going to do that next.
Who the hell are you? CIA? Delta?
Welcome to 4th Echelon.
So EA published a statement when Jade left the studio and new appointments were made, and I'm going to go through that with you, and then we're going to take a little bit of a look at what a lot of that actually means. So it reads, EA Studios is focused on bringing more creative new games and content to players. Laura Meal and her team have taken several steps internally to better support our game makers in this pursuit, such as expanding... Oh, hang on, I missed a bit. Shit, I missed a bit. So we're going to begin by going through the statement that was published by EA, and then we'll kind of dissect a little bit about what some of this means, specifically in the context of Jade Raymond and Star Wars. So it reads, EA Studios is focused on bringing more creative new games and content to players. Laura Meal and her team have taken several steps internally to better support our game makers in this pursuit, such as expanding Samantha Ryan's portfolio to lead additional studios, including Motive. And this comes from John Riesenberg, head of communications from EA. And this was a statement published to VentureBeat. Samantha is known for driving creative design and supporting game teams so that they can bring their visions to life. She's a deeply experienced game maker with gamography that spans The Sims to Batman Arkham City to No One Lives Forever to the highly anticipated Anthem. With this change, Jade Raymond has decided to leave Electronic Arts. In her time with us, Jade has helped build great teams, and our projects underway at Motive and other studios continue unchanged. We're appreciative of all her efforts, and we wish Jade all the best as she moves on to her next adventure. We are driving greater creativity into everything we do across EA Studios, and we'll look forward to sharing more in the months to come. The thing that I find interesting about this whole scenario is that Jade's not really addressed until the very end. And this is one of the most high-profile developers you've got in your entire portfolio of studios and developers within them at the entirety of EA. And she's kind of a footnote at the end of a statement here. It leaves me to wonder as to whether she was pushed in some way. Maybe EA had enough of what she was doing, Look, I could be reading into this totally the wrong way. Maybe Jade needed to move on and this Samantha Ryan has stepped up as a result. But the way it's even presented in the statement suggests that maybe things weren't amicable there at the end, and it's led to this really weird, jarring, awkward ending of the relationship. That all remains to be seen. Hopefully that comes out down the line. Hopefully Jade herself comes out and talks a little bit about all of that. But we're going to have to wait and see. So the departure of Jade Raymond leaves a lot of questions about EA Studios, but specifically what they're doing with the Star Wars license. We saw what happened with Battlefront 1. That was rightly criticised for a predatory DLC rollout plan that cost players a lot of money, and obviously the lack of single player in that game. In the sequel, they addressed that. They brought in a single player, which Jade had a hand in developing, but the game was, again, rightly criticised for its microtransactions and how that was implemented, and that was a huge fiasco that we spoke about last year. Go back and check that out if you need to. We've seen the closure of Visceral Studios, the departure of Amy Hennig. That game looked fantastic. It seems to still be in the works some way, somehow, but we don't know what that is yet, and it's certainly changed its direction at the very least. We got a very ham-fisted announcement for Jedi Fallen Order, the game from Respawn. It was almost as though, oh, we need something, let's crowbar it here, we'll just talk to Vince Zampella in the crowd during our EA conference. It was jarring, it was weird, it shouldn't have been the way it was. And now we've got this. I'm worried about what EA is doing with this license. It's not the longest license in the world. I'm led to believe it's about 10 years long, and we're most of the way through that now. At this point, regardless, I think, of what happens with that former Visceral game and what happens with Respawn, I'm almost of the mind that that license is better going elsewhere. EA is perhaps not in the best position to be able to handle this thing and do it correctly. And there are plenty of other publishers out there that we know, we, the gamers, know could do a better job with this license. Ubisoft is the first one that springs to mind. But maybe you don't have to give it exclusively to one publisher. You could look at what Marvel's doing, where they've given Spider-Man to Insomniac. Crystal Dynamics have an Avengers game, and I'm sure that there's other games in gestation elsewhere as well. Telltale did a little bit with Guardians of the Galaxy, rest in peace. We've seen lots of things with the Marvel license going to different people who are experts in their craft, and we're going to do justice to those games. And I don't see why the same thing can't happen here with Star Wars. It just needs to be very careful, and they need to be very selective about who gets what. And if they do that right, we're going to get some excellent games going forward. Maybe we don't need to rely solely on EA. As for Jade, here's hoping she lands on her feet. She is one of the more prominent names in the industry, so I'm sure she'll find a job pretty easily, whether that's at another publisher, whether she starts her own studio, who knows, be it big, small, indie, whatever. Hopefully she lands on her feet. She'll be making great games again in the near future.
But there's a new model that's coming, what I'm calling an ecosystem model. Before it was one way from a creator to an audience, then it's two-way audience, creator, back and forth. Now it's tons of different roles that all participate in the experience in different ways, right?
So that concludes another episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down below here. And hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to every video the moment it goes live on the channel. That includes Patched, The Insider, Late Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole lot more, including Player 2 Plays. We've got a lot of those. Please be sure to visit the website, player2.net.au, where you'll find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, the Player 2 Writers Draft, a whole bunch of content relating to PAX Australia, which I am attending the moment this video goes live. I'll be there. There's a whole bunch of the Player 2 team that will be there as well. Go to the website and check out all the stuff that we're bringing to you from that event. That includes interviews and a whole bunch of other things that we'll be gradually rolling out in the days and weeks following PAX. Visit us on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, and consider kicking in a few dollars. At the lower tiers, you'll get early access to episodes of this, Patched, and a whole lot more. And at the higher tiers, you'll get monthly episode exclusives and the ability to join us in the monthly Player 2 podcast. There's some awesome incentives there, so please consider checking them out. For rolling updates, you can find me at PaulJamesP2 on Twitter, the website you'll find at Player2AU on Twitter, and until next time, that is the whole Jade Raymond departure thing, kind of wrapped up to the point of knowledge that we have at the moment. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.